we're going to look at over the next 3 weeks or so is gender and crime, and today we're going to start by looking at patterns and trends. What we're going to look at is are there any gender differences that exist within crime statistics, and also analyse how accurate these statistics actually are. Obviously we're going to look at different arguments and different perspectives and see if we can actually use any of these to offer explanations of any differences there may be within gender. So who is actually committing these crimes? Well, not surprisingly, it appears that most of these crimes are committed by men. 4 out of 5 convicted offenders in England and Wales are actually male, and by the age of 40, only 9% of females in England and Wales have been convicted of a crime, compared to 32% of male who had convictions. Men are more likely to be repeat offenders as well, so the idea of career criminals is much more likely in males than it is in females. When we get to types of crime a little bit later on, we will see that there's a major difference, but men are 15 times more likely than women to commit homicide, so murder, etc. We will look into the details a little bit more of that over the next couple of weeks, but in terms of statistics, it's really important to understand that. So not only is there a apparent difference in the volume of crimes being committed by males and females, but also the types of crime suggest that there's differences there. So males are more likely to be carrying out violence and sexual offences, whereas women more to do with property offences such as shoplifting, etc. Burglary is very much a male-dominated area, but normal property offences such as shoplifting and petty theft are carried out more by females, backed up by Smart in 1977, who looks at these being more trivial ideas. So is it really a case of women committing less crime? Well, first of all, we've got to think, can we actually trust these official crime statistics? We've discussed this in the past about what issues are around crime statistics. One of them is that these female crimes, if they are more trivial, like shoplifting, etc., they're less likely to be reported. Also, when you think about the idea of, say, prostitution and who's involved in prostitution, the prostitute isn't going to necessarily report a crime if they are a prostitute because of the police's views of them. And also, if you're a man who's been ripped off by a prostitute or whatever, you're very unlikely to go to the police and talk about it because, you know, you're risking your marriage, but also, you know, your job, and also your public status. Women are less likely to be prosecuted than men because these crimes aren't as detected or reported as much. So the reason why we see less women being convicted of offences is because they are less likely to be reported, or they're just not detectable. And there's also this idea that women are let off quite lightly, and we're going to look at that a little bit more now. The chivalry thesis is put forward to argue that women are given quite a lenient sentence, mainly because of how men judge women within society. If we ask ourselves the questions, who are the majority of police officers and magistrates and judges, etc., they tend to be men, and they are socialised as well to act in a chivalrous way towards women, to look out for women, to kind of protect women. An example of this is Pollack, and he argues that men have this protected attitude towards women, and that they are, they kind of dislike arresting them, and they didn't really want to prosecute them. Judges and juries also felt as though they weren't fulfilling their chivalrous role by actually finding them guilty. It could thus be argued that this chivalrous viewpoint creates an invalid picture, so it's not actually accurate. So maybe there are as many crimes being committed by women, but they're just not being prosecuted for them as much. Graham and Bowling in 1995 carried out some research into this of 14 to 25-year-olds, and found that although males were very much more likely to offend, the difference was a lot smaller than what was recorded. So males were only 2.33 times more likely to admit to an offence, but the official crime statistics shows that there was a four times more likely. So there's a major difference in the statistics. Obviously, we need to bear that in mind when we're looking at official crime statistics. And when it comes to the actual prosecution side of things, Flood, Page et al. Looked at, in these self-reported studies, that 1 in 11 females had actually been cautioned or prosecuted, whereas the male, it was 1 in 7 of these self-reporters actually were prosecuted or cautioned. Backed up again by Hood, who looks at that women are 1/3 less likely to be jailed for very similar crimes. So if a man commits a crime similar to a woman, then women are less likely to be jailed for that. If we look at some Ministry of Justice statistics that were published in 2009, it actually shows us though that women are more likely to be cautioned, not prosecuted, but cautioned. So 49% of female offenders were cautioned, where only 30% of males were cautioned. This basically means that females are more likely to just receive a caution for doing the offence, whereas it's 70% of males are likely to be actually prosecuted for it, so it's a much higher number. In terms of arguments against this chivalry thesis, then Farrington and Morris basically said that women aren't more likely to be sentenced any more leniently than men. So they were looking in a magistrate's courses of offences of theft and found that women were getting exactly the same sentences as men. Buckling Farrington a year later did an observational study in a department store and found that there was twice as many male shoplifters than there were female shoplifters. Now, as the figure for the official crime statistics show that the conviction for shoplifting was very similar between males and females, it suggests that there's actually more males getting off with shoplifting because the figure of actual offences and convictions is very similar. Stephen Box carried out some research actually into self-reporting studies of crimes and noticed that there might be an idea of leniency, but it was also down to the offence because women's offences are normally less serious. That's why they tend to get off with more crime than men, and it wasn't necessarily to do with the fact that they are a woman, it's to do with the level of crime. Women are also more likely to show remorse, so they are obviously going to get off with it or get a lesser sentence if they show that they are remorseful and that they understand that what they have done is actually wrong. Feminists argue that the court system is actually against them. It's not for the benefit and they aren't getting a more lenient time. It actually goes against them. And Heidenschon believes that especially if women are deviating away from their gender roles. So, for instance, there's like double standards. So, girls who aren't acting like girls and maybe are a bit wayward, etc., are more likely to end up in care than boys because that's what boys are supposed to do. Boys would be boys, etc. Pat Carlin puts forward a very similar viewpoint and argues that depending on your family role, so if you're a mother, a wife, etc., that plays a major part in what kind of sentence that you will get because there are certain expectations about what you should be doing. And also, if you don't live a conventional life, so maybe you're a little bit off the rails and you're not doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing, then there's more chance of you receiving a custodial sentence, especially if your parents believe that you are like beyond control and you're a bit wayward and you're a naughty person, you're a naughty girl, you are more likely to get a custodial sentence. Carlin found as well that if your children were in care, then you were much more likely to receive a custodial sentence because you're seen as someone who isn't a good mother and you can't look after your children. And so there's that negative stereotype and viewpoint. And you could also argue, depending on where you are in your social background, that will have a major impact on whether or not you're going to receive a custodial sentence. Feminists believe that these double standards exist because of a patriarchal society, and that's identified even further through the justice system. In rape cases, Sandra Walklate argues that it's very rarely the defendant in rape cases who is actually up on trial, but it tends to be the victim, and they're having to show that they are a respectable person and that it wasn't their fault. In 1987, Adler said it had very much to do with how a woman portrayed herself. So if she was a single parent or unemployed and things like that, she would be treated a lot differently to if she was a successful businesswoman or a pillar of society. You could even say that the way that you look and that you dress and that you behave has an impact on how judges and the juries look at you. We will look at this a little bit more with some newspaper articles next week, but I just want to end on this quite controversial quote from a judge, Judge Wilde, who said that women don't always mean no, and it's not just how they show it or how they act or how they make it clear that they don't want to have sex. Basically, if she doesn't want it to do it, she just needs to keep her legs shut. controversial. We'll end there. Bye bye.